Hello and welcome back to another one of my F1 chats. My name is Alex Does F1 Stuff and this is episode number 15, and in today's episode it's going to be a slightly different one, I think. We're going to be covering a big topic that F1 just released, and that is going to be the most influential person in Formula 1 as a whole, and there will also be a channel chat afterwards. Not entirely sure how long this video is going to go, but hey ho, we'll see. So starting with the most influential person in Formula 1 history, this obviously comes from the Formula 1 website as it's something that they set up. They are doing this really cool thing where they've pulled together, it's slightly later on in the article, but they've pulled together 32 individual people into four categories of 8, four categories of 8. So drivers, game changers, team bosses and innovators, and they're all pitted against each other as to who has had the most influence on the sport. So the article starts off by saying, who is the single most influential person in the history of Formula 1? In the sport's 70th year, we have set ourselves the challenge of finding this out, and we need your help to do it. Or our help. So they've asked a panel of experts to come up with 32 names of the people they believe have had the biggest influence on Formula 1, and see in the bracket below, which will pop up in a moment, and they will eventually be whittled down over the next 10 days to a single winner. So here is the board as stated previously in the article. It is split into drivers in the top left, then you have the game changers in the bottom left, team bosses in the top right, and then innovators in the bottom. And today's round we are looking at the most influential drivers. I would have to say, out of the current grid, not just general history wise, out of the current grid I would say the most influential driver is Lewis Hamilton, simply because of his social media influence and the way that he's changed what it is to be a Formula 1 driver. But equally that's the reason why he has so much hate as well, because he is so different. But anyway, round 1 is Sir Jackie Stewart versus Max Verstappen. So this is actually quite an interesting battle. So the case for Jackie Stewart, he was basically the pioneer of the safety aspect for the drivers. So it was after his Belgian 1966 crash where he was trapped beneath his car for 25 minutes, fuel-soaked and fearful for his life. So ridiculed by some in the old school for his unyielding stance, his tireless and often lonely campaign for proper barriers, runoff areas, advanced medical facilities and proper marshalling not only helped save lives at the time, it has had a lasting impact on the sport. So personally for me, out of this battle, Jackie Stewart wins this by far, as Verstappen, yes, being young, coming into the sport, incredibly young at 17, hasn't had that much influence. The only things he's just been involved in more sort of controversies and what the rules mean, I suppose, with what instances were there? Kimi Räikkönen at Spa, moving on the Camel Straight. There are just multiple other instances that he hasn't had much influence. I don't think he hasn't had the chance to have much influence. So for me, this round definitely goes to Jackie Stewart. Now round number 2 is a interesting one. Michael Schumacher versus Niki Lauda. This is a very, very interesting one. So undoubtedly the German had an enormous influence on the sport, whose record books he would completely rewrite, changing the game by ensuring he wrung out every bit of the considerable natural talent he was blessed with. For those that don't know, I am actually just reading the article on my second monitor. I just didn't choose to put it up as I wanted to keep the pictures up there instead. So I'm just reading what each case for each driver is. So preparation for Schumacher was everything, whether putting in hours with engineers or taking his fitness to the levels that enabled him to drive races utterly flat out, without losing focus or seemingly breaking sweat. He was the first driver to properly push himself as a physical athlete compared to all the other ones. Wouldn't go out drinking so much as all the other ones, wouldn't go partying and all of this. He would focus purely on the sport, and ultimately that helped, and that is why he is a 7-time Formula 1 world champion. And obviously he's shrouded in controversy still, but you can't take it away from him. Whereas the case for Lauda, he is just the huge name. Obviously his accident in August 76 at the Nürburgring, and just defying everything and coming back just a couple races later. Yes, he still ended up losing the championship, but to have an almost life-threatening accident and then just come back from that in the same season. Because remember when Massa had his incident where he was hit with the spring in 2009 in Hungary, he was out for the rest of the year. Similar sort of life-threatening incidents, and yet Lauda came back and was able to do well, and then later to win the championship in 84 as well. After that, many years after that, it was astonishing. The article actually goes on to talk about his political role in Formula 1, which I feel strains a bit further away from the influential driver aspect of it, because it talks about his roles in Ferrari, Jaguar, and obviously Mercedes up until his death last year. I'm not sure if I would want to include that in my judgment of who was the most influential driver. He would be more in, obviously not quite team bosses, but possibly game changers. So for me, I feel this round goes to Schumacher. Now, round number 3, Ayrton Senna versus Jack Brabham. So obviously the case for Ayrton Senna, Brazil had loved F1 since the 70s, but one man made it a religion. Ayrton Senna wasn't merely an icon back home. Like Muhammad Ali, he was a global sporting phenomenon, his name and image becoming cultural touchpoints. F1 with Senna was always appointment viewing, whether it was a shimmering qualifying lap, superlative wet weather driving, or even a press conference. He demanded watching. No one else transcended the sport in the same way. Now, with his life being cut short so tragically, 26 years ago, a couple days ago, May 1st, it's hard to judge the impact that he did have or would have had he not passed. Things may have panned out differently. He may be a 4, 5, 6-time Formula 1 world champion had it not changed. Perhaps something may have soured that, not spreading any disregard or any bad over Senna, but I feel the death sort of immortalised his whole image of a driver. But certainly he is one of the greats. But to go up against Jack Brabham, the brilliant, formidable racer, there was much more to him than that. For a start, he was an engineer, so he was the only person in Formula 1 history to win a world championship in his own car, which I believe was in 1968, maybe before that. The influence, I would have to say, goes to Senna. Even just looking at this, just before even making a decision, it hands down has to go to Senna over Brabham. And finally, match number 4, Lewis Hamilton versus Juan Manuel Fangio. So obviously I've already spoken about my views of Lewis Hamilton already earlier in this chat, but to have him go up against Fangio, the one who was, like Hamilton, idolised by everybody else before him, everybody who raced under him as well, to be that figure at the top of the sport that everybody looks up to, they are actually more comparable than you think, 70 years apart. But personally, I feel it is Lewis Hamilton who has had the most influence over Juan Manuel Fangio. So looking at that with the drivers, I'm not sure who's actually going to go further, because looking back at if I actually go back to the diagram a second. So looking at this, the winner from the Stewart Verstappen will go up against the winner from the Hamilton Fangio. So perhaps we might see a Stewart Hamilton battle, but then who would win that? And then equally Schumacher Lauda the winner of that would go up against Senna versus Brabham, so we could see a Senna Schumacher or possibly a Senna Lauda. As for the most influential driver out of that list, I personally would have to say Senna. That doesn't quite contradict what I said at the opening part of the video, as I said the most influential driver of the current grid was Lewis Hamilton, but I think out of that list of 8, Ayrton Senna is the most influential. So I will do another one of these for when the next round comes out, so either the Game Changers, the Team Bosses, or the Innovators, or even when the next round of the drivers comes out, because that might just be tomorrow or today, depending on when I actually record everything. But anyway, moving a little bit away from Formula 1 now. If you don't want to watch anything about my YouTube channel and a little bit of statistics about my YouTube channel, then you can by all means turn off now. That was all the F1 news that I want to cover. I'll probably do another more F1 chat slightly later on in the week. So I did another one of these a little while ago where I spoke about, I think it was almost a month ago actually, my first month of making content, and now it is almost coming up to the second month of making content. So right here is a graph of the views of my last 28 days, and you can see it's just nice sort of 4s-ish across the board, and then we just hit a peak. We hit a peak as of May 4th, and we've leaped into the realms of the mid-40s, high 50s sort of range. And as you can see is that on the overview we've had a bump in subscribers of 7, so I think I went from what must have been like 5 or 6 or something like that to 12 now, and that all just came in one weekend. It was the weekend of the virtual Brazilian Grand Prix, so the Sunday, and I don't know really where it all came from. I was just doing what I usually do, which is commenting on the live stream and just engaging with the other fans, which I did for all the other previous streams and such. It just seemed to catch, or something snagged, and it's sort of going up, which is nice. So obviously I'm still doing this alongside all my uni work, and it's just filling in all my spare time, which I really enjoy. Rather than just wasting away my time watching a Netflix documentary, I'm instead researching a sport that I like, creating that double points finale, learning the history, or reading further into all these news articles, finding different stories to look at, creating the 1.5 series and such. It's all really cool, engaging stuff that I'm now happy to be doing, and equally happy that other people are enjoying the content as well. So right here is the impressions. So this is how many people have physically seen the thumbnail of my video, not necessarily clicked on the video to watch it, but have physically seen it. And again, we started with a peak at the beginning of April. I thought, oh cool, we're going up, and then it just went back down to its normal levels of around 50-ish, less than 100, and suddenly again the same weekend it reaches up to almost 400 impressions of people. But I don't understand how though, because I was doing exactly the same as I normally do, comment on posts and things like that in different videos. So I comment on the race, I comment on some other, who's that other one, Chain Bear as well, comment on videos like that, and it just seems to be going up and up. And equally, well, obviously as the views are increasing, obviously the watch time would, in a similar sort of graph. I believe that peak on April 12th is a bit of a fluky one, or an outlier, because my regular kind of content is between 10 and 20 minutes roughly, whereas that video must have been the 1.5 series that I did, which was 45 minutes long. And personally on my other YouTube account I watch the entirety of my video from the start to the finish just to check any issues. So when I finish editing everything, I will watch it through on the edit screen, I will export it, watch it through before I upload it on Windows Media Player, and then upload it, watch it all the way through on YouTube, just to properly check if there are any issues with the videos. But yes, there are still some mistakes that slip through. I still forget to change some of my Excel tables or things like that, so that there may be some issues, or I forget to highlight any issues, or I say something wrong when I'm recording, which has happened. I say the wrong name or something like that. So there are always mistakes that will slip through, but, you know, I'm only human. And as for the actual content itself, I've put some music to the background, which hopefully you can hear now, and equally I'm changing the audio, because one thing that I spoke to a friend about is that the videos were apparently quiet, yet whenever I make it in the edits, it's a perfect volume for myself. I export it, it's again a perfect volume for myself. I don't change any settings on my computer or my headset, and then I upload it. Yes, it's a little bit on the quieter side, so I think if I just up each of the volumes by a little bit in the editing process, they should be at a more normal level. But I think that's about it. There isn't too much else I wanted to say in the channel chat. I might make a separate series about them where I just ramble about my channel, show progressions and things like that similar to this, rather than stitching it into an F1 chat. Yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed that little video, and I will catch you in the next one, whatever I decide to make. I'll see you then.